Hi, everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with Jessica Diggs, midwife, doula mentor, and co-founder of Centered, about creating a sustainable career in birth work.
Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, and I'm a nurse with my PhD and the founder of Evidence-Based Birth. Join me each week as we work together to get evidence-based information into the hands of families and professionals around the world. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. See ebbirth.com/disclaimer for more details.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Decker, pronouns she, her, and I'll be your host for today's episode. If there are any detailed content or trigger warnings, we'll post them in the description or show notes that go along with this episode. And now I'd like to introduce our honored guest. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Jessica Diggs, pronouns she, her, who is a licensed midwife working in a solo practice in Los Angeles. Jessica supports people and families through holistic gynecological care, home birth services, and conception support. Jessica has a skill and love for making childbirth and reproductive education digestible and accessible for all people. Jessica has a Substack called the jessicadiggs.substack.com. That's her latest publication where she shares her thoughts as a midwife. She's co-founder of Centered, a curated community, and she's the former lead educator and curriculum developer at DTI, which is Doula Training International. When Jessica's not talking about birth and bodies, she loves hosting dinner parties, eating, and devouring a good book. I am so thrilled that Jessica is here. Welcome, Jessica, to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
So happy to be here.
Hey, Jessica, we are really thrilled to listen to your story with our audience. And so I was wondering if you could tell us about how you found yourself in birth work and also, in your case, both a doula and a midwife. Can you talk about where that came from?
Yeah. From an early age, I was fascinated with the body, with how it worked, with our sexual health, with what was going on. And I often was the person answering those questions for my friends. Around early 1819, I volunteered at a women's health information center because I was pre-med and I was trying to do all the extracurriculars. And I used to do the maternity tours for them. So I walked families around labor and delivery, showing them the rooms. And a part of that script was to talk about doulas. I didn't quite know what they did, but I knew that they were magical people who didn't count against the visitation policy. And that intrigued me. I was like, why? And I just knew they did, and I said it with confidence, but I was not sure what they actually did and why they were so important that they shouldn't be counted again. Over Christmas break, I went down a rabbit hole around what a doula was, what they did, how could I become one? And by the following, January, February, I had enrolled in a training, taken a doula training, and did births all throughout college and have been going to births in some capacity ever since. I moved to Los Angeles to pursue medical school around 2014, ending not loving my interview process, really, really being discouraged by the other applicants, and really having a heart-to-heart around, did I want to do this for the next 8 years? Did I want to be in the system where I was going to be really fighting against a lot of my beliefs and philosophies around birth? And my dad was actually the person who asked, he was like, you could tackle the system. You could. If there's anyone who could, it could be you, but do you want to? And that was really, I didn't really want to in that capacity. I do it in other ways. So I withdrew, enrolled in midwifery school, and then really just expanded my education practice. I took a childbirth education class in 2015 and have been teaching couples and families ever since. I love group classes, love doing that. And then I enrolled in midwifery school to expand on being able to offer people choices, being able to be a provider in the room, being able to help parents practice parenting in a safe space. Since then, I've been doing my own solo practice in Los Angeles.
I love hearing when people discover doula work or shortly after. And I know we were talking earlier about your amazing origin story, and you mentioned you attended a birth in college. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got invited to this birth? What was that experience like? I imagine that helped with sometimes they talk about being bitten by the birth bug. So what happened there?
I had just finished my doula training and I was working at a hospital. They had a beautiful integrated system where doulas were kind of paged if they had a patient that didn't have either adequate support or wanted to attempt an unmedicated birth but didn't hire a doula. And one of the older retired nurses, I happened to be at lunch with her and she had just gotten the page. She's like, "You want to go to a birth?" And I was like, right now? She's like, "Yeah." And I was like, sure. And so we get to the hospital. The nurses are happy to see us. I was like bitten by the doula bug a little. It doesn't exist like that in every space, but so I was a little misled. But the nurses are happy to see us. They're like, "Oh, this person could definitely use a doula." They had a lot of mental health issues and past experience, both them and the partner. It was a VBAC. And it was second baby. And it was one of those where I was thrown in. They stayed around and hung out with me for a bit. And they're like, "Okay, we're going to go now." And I was there for 18 hours with this family I'd never met before. She got an epidural. All I remember about it is that we online shopped for sunglasses for a portion of the birth. We ate a sandwich together. Like we split a sandwich. She still eat for some reason, and which she should be able to, but it was very unique. And the baby was born, and it was this beautiful, magical thing. And I don't remember being tired. I was young, but it was amazing. And ever since then, I signed up for the hospital program, and I probably went to 1 to 2 births a month the entire time I was in college.
Wow. So you're doing this the whole time you were studying and taking classes and being a student as well.
Yes. And it was an easy way to get excused from an exam because often the professors were impressed and they were like, I remember I missed one class. I think it was just a class. When I got back to class the next time, the professor made me stand up and tell the class what I did and why it was important. And I was very embarrassed, but also like, okay, sure, I'll tell people what a doula is.
I have met students just like you who just become so enamored with the whole birthing process and watching families transform. And it's funny because sometimes their parents are like, "Why do you have all these birth books on your wish list? And is there something we need to know about?"
Yeah.
No, but it's refreshing and exciting, I think, when young people find out about this career path early in life.
Yeah, I think my parents weren't too shocked. I saw my mom was pregnant with the baby. My youngest sister's 10 years younger. So I saw that pregnancy and we were at that birth. And I was fine at that birth. So I don't think they were too shocked. I was very excited. And then we had our dog had puppies. I can't remember, maybe I was probably like 12. And everyone went to sleep and I was like, "I'm not leaving her." And my dad gave me a poncho and like a flashlight and was like, "Have at it. Stay in the backyard." And I was like, "All right." And I stayed up all night and watched her have her puppies. So it wasn't too far-fetched for them to envision me in this space. Even then, though, they still, as a career birth worker, they didn't know what I did for a long time until my sister had a baby and they actually got to see me in action.
Oh, really? Yeah. So you got to be at the birth when your sister was giving birth as well.
When my sister had my nephew 6 years ago, I was there and my parents were there and they got to witness like what it looks like to hold space for people and how to navigate the hospital system. And yeah, they were a bit blown away after the fact, but I had been doing it for almost 8 years by then. So
you're pretty experienced at that point. But even at your first birth as a doula, what strikes me about what you talked about is how much of it was just simply your presence in the room. Yes. That abiding presence and bringing yourself to the situation, not necessarily years of skills or tricks in your back pocket, but just yourself and your presence.
Yes, it is something that comes up a lot for me as I train new doulas and hold space for them. It's like the most powerful thing we can do, and what the evidence shows about the benefits of doulas is us being present. And this person, not having been able to build a relationship with her beforehand, she just needed a person to talk to process some things, to answer some questions, or to create space for her to have those questions answered by her actual medical team. And it was powerful. It was beautiful. And it was exhilarating. And then it didn't really sink in until a few births later. It was like, I don't need to know everything. I just need to be here, be present.
And then you transfer those skills on, like there's this common thread through your work as a childbirth educator and then as a midwife. Can you talk a little bit about, what it felt like to become a midwife apprentice and go through that whole training program?
Yes, I felt very, very, very lucky to have been a doula for a while before I became a midwife. So a lot of it is like theoretical, but also as a student, I'm observing a lot. So I am often in the role of a doula for the first portion of that apprenticeship. And so that observation phase was really nice because it was like, okay, I'm just doing what I already do. And then I'm also like learning a little bit more and watching a little bit more of the actual provider. The apprenticeship is about 3 to 5 years, depending on how quickly you can get the clinical side done. And I didn't have kids and single, so I was like banged out that portion of things. But I worked in a busy birth center for 2 of my apprenticeships and then a solo home birth practice where I got a lot of I kind of polished off my skills and also got a lot of the gynecological and conception support skill set in that portion of my apprenticeship.
So aside from supporting growing families, I know a lot of your work is focused on mentorship and education for other birth workers, and you kind of mentioned that earlier. How did you find a calling for supporting other birth workers and cultivating like culture among birth workers?
This came about with my move to Los Angeles. So I started in North Carolina. That's where I trained. That's where I went to those first births. And then I moved to LA and I needed to build community around being a doula where it was my actual source of income. So in North Carolina, I was volunteering most of those births. It was built into the hospital system. I was living as a student, so I didn't need the income in the same way. But I was moving to one of the most expensive cities in the world, and I wanted to do this for a living. I needed to figure out how to actually make an income, and I didn't have that skill set. But I hit the ground running. I befriended every known doula in Los Angeles, just like cold calling for coffee dates, going to all of the meetups, to the point that I ended up winning it was a popularity test of the best doula in Los Angeles, like the year I got here. No one knew me. They didn't know I was actually a good doula, but because I met so many people that when it came time to vote, I actually won. But I just created a sense of community. I knew I needed that. I knew no one in Los Angeles I think I was 21 when I moved here. So I needed to create community, and I was really good at that. It has led to literally every big career shift in birth work. From my job at DTI was just through Instagram, creating community. My job at Loom was just through an event that I met Erica. We hit it off. Like I am a big person who creates space for myself. And a lot of that is through true connection, like really getting to know people. And so I have always made time. People made time for me. And when it came time where we were seeing that there were less spaces for doulas, I was like, let's create something. I'm already giving back my time. My time is a little bit more precious now. So let's just bring people in where they can talk to each other. They can hold space for each other. They can find their backup doula. They have a safe space to process. And also, I've seen many doulas come and go. I've been in this work for over 10 years, which is unheard of. Most doulas' life cycle in this work is about 2 to 3 years. So I also was feeling a big push to see how can we make this a sustainable career for these awesome humans who want to do it for a long time.
And so how were you creating this community? Was this online or was this in an actual space?
Originally, a lot of it was in person. And then post-COVID, it has moved online and has slowly been back in person. So Center is what we created for our current container for community, and it includes an online platform. It includes in-person connect gatherings, and then it includes online, sometimes in person, cultivate workshops where doulas can build new skill set.
I know this is a really common problem that you're talking about, the feeling like you don't have a community connection with other doulas. And in the EBB Pro membership, we'll get that question a lot from new members who join and are like, I just moved to Charleston, or I just moved here or there, and I don't know any of the doulas, and it doesn't feel like there's a community. How do I find community? What advice do you have for those new doulas?
I would say if there is any, I would always say post on Facebook, find any Facebook groups or any Eventbrite things, anything that's free that you can just search and post and introduce yourself to the community, and then put out your ask. Say, hey, I am Jessica Diggs. I'm a new birth worker in this area. I specialize in this, this, and this. I'm hoping to reach out and meet people to potentially be a backup doula, learn more about what you do, build my resource list, because then they're like, oh, they're advertised for me. There's something in it for them. I would love to either get coffee or meet up for a walk. Is anyone interested? Just like you have to put yourself out there or show up at any events. If there is a vibrant birth community in that area, show up at all the events. To me, I took that networking time as vital as doing any of the admin for my business. So I was carving out 2 to 3 hours a week to go to events as if I would carve out 2 to 3 hours a week to do social media. All of that was pouring back into my business.
That makes perfect sense. And I think sometimes people think, well, I don't know who they are. And you gave some really great examples. And then just sometimes a simple Google search, like doulas in blank city. And I did that for some people, and I found news articles about different doulas, because sometimes there are reporters who are reporting on work that especially doulas of color have been doing recently in communities. And so you can kind of find out who are the people out there who are already being featured and are doing work for organizations or other things like that.
Yeah. Anytime when I was training doulas and I was in a new city that I didn't know, I would always spend my time before the training and look up all of the things, whether it's like a free program at a hospital or some awesome grassroots organization. I would already have that list for them. And I'm like, these people seem very willing to mentor, train, engage, or they need actual doulas for this insert awesome project. This is where you want to start. And anytime you are reaching out to people, maintaining an ongoing relationship is also helpful. I tell people all the time for myself, I'm training or meeting or seeing hundreds of doulas all the time. I remember the ones who are constantly reaching out. Not annoyingly, but like actually just popping in and say, hey, I'm still doing this thing. Or, hey, just wanted you to share this. Or I wanted you to know I am available for birth work. So when someone asks me for a doula, they're the top of my like forebrain and forethought about who to recommend.
And doulas go in and out of the work too, in terms of being at births, because doulas may get pregnant themselves or have a baby or be going through another circumstance where they can't attend birth. So they're always looking to build their connections. And you've given some really good suggestions. And one thing that struck me about what you said is, the in-person connections and how a lot of people, I've had this myself as well, trying to figure out friendships. Okay, so I think a lot of people today feel really lonely, especially COVID. And most of us do not take the initiative to create gatherings and invite other people to something. And my husband is like the perfect example of somebody who does that. He has some other friends, most of whom are dads, and he takes the initiative to text them all and invite them to come over or to go out. And he's created this amazing little community of dads that support one another. And I don't necessarily have that because I don't take the initiative to be the one to invite people. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That is awesome. That is very common that people want community, but community is an action, it's a verb, and it's an exchange. And that's a big frustration that I have with mentoring new doulas. I'm always like, I can easily find these resources in your area, a place I don't live, and I just did a quick Google search. Why aren't you able to find them or engage with these folks? And somebody was that we are introverts. We are lonely, but we want it to come to us in a certain container at a certain time. And a lot of this that's not how there's an aspect of manifesting, but there's an action that goes behind getting what you need and meeting that need. I always say, stay true to yourself. You do not have to recreate what I did or what someone else did, but you need to figure out what works for you, and do it consistently. Consistency is the thing, and community is an exchange. We build amazing workshops and events, and we're always like dumbfounded when the turnout is like, no one's here. Like 300 people voted on Instagram that they wanted this, and 15 people showed up. It's like, it is frustrating. We'll keep doing it because it's even intimate gatherings are amazing, but it is frustrating. I think we have a misunderstanding when it comes to what intentional gathering is and what community looks like. And it's often a do it for us and facilitate when it's a gather and exchange. I'm hoping that that's becoming more of a normalized thing. So I love Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering. I devoured that book when I was creating childbirth education content, because like how we come into any space should be very intentional. And a lot of what she talks about is that it starts from the invite of like, what type of space do you want people to feel that this is? Is it informal? Is it formal? Is it going to be social? Is it going to be more reflective? And so I've been playing around with a lot of that to make sure we're hitting on what doulas need, what birth workers need when they're coming into spaces. I think with that, we're getting a better turnout because like sometimes they just need to unload. So like something around their body and like, self-care. And sometimes they need to learn. And so trying to separate the events versus making it a one-size-fits-all, like come together, we'll do all these three, people are overwhelmed. So I think sometimes we're having to use a little psychology to actually be intentional about the gatherings. But I also think individuals need to realize that community is an exchange. It is not just someone coming to you. You actually are bringing something to the table that we value.
Yeah, I love that. Remembering that, having an intention for any gathering that you talked about. Then also you talked about being persistent, not just having one-time gathering and then being done. And it made me think I tend to do that in person. Like I'll invite people over for a fire pit because we can do that in Kentucky. We don't have a drought right now. And, you gather around the fire pit with a bunch of birth workers or midwifery students or midwives. And a lot of times that first meeting, there's just a lot of debriefing, a lot of unloading of everybody's burdens, which is important. We need to do that. But then it would be nice. I can see how meeting more regularly could move on from the debriefing and do more of the connecting and exchanging. And yeah.
With Center, we have our Connect, and it's a monthly gathering. And you see that, like initially for people's first time, it's like unpack. And for those who've been coming for a while, it's diving a little deeper. It's building more relationship. And there's some questions here and there, but they're also in a space where now they aren't just coming to answer a question. They're coming to have a question answered. They're coming to answer some of the newbies' questions.
Get back. Yeah.
Yeah. The ongoing regular spaces can be a drag sometimes if you're hosting, because like, I gotta be here again. But it is every time it's super fulfilling, and it does build actual relationships with the people in the space.
I love it. So talk to me about, you work with both new doulas and experienced doulas and doulas in training. What are some of the trends you're seeing in birth work right now that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, birth work has evolved so much, and for the better. When I first started, it was a largely white, cis, heteronormative space. And over the last 10 years, it has evolved to be much more diverse, much more inclusive, not just like the people, but the actual type of care. The biggest trends that I'm seeing for all involved is, one, an intentionality to be true to who they actually are versus fit into the mold of what a doula should be. Intentionality around BIPOC culture and community, but also the issues of most marginalized communities, whether it's queer, trans, BIPOC folks. I would say a intentionality around sustainability with this career in comparison to what I've seen from my trainings and the previous 5 years, where people come into it and it's just a hobby. Someone's retired, someone's partner's bankrolling their life so they can just do this here and there, which no shade, I'm jealous. But like, some people are just coming in, putting a toe in, going to a few births, and that's it. So there's been a lot more conversations around, how can I do this for a long time without burning out, making a living wage, and also supporting the people who look like me or who actually really need this care, and it not being just for privileged, high income, typically white cis families.
So are you seeing more doulas stay in it for the long term? Because I know there's that saying, the shelf life of a doula is 3 to 5 years. Are you seeing more people find ways to make it more sustainable? And how are they doing that?
Similar to, I don't have babies, but I do see like my doula babies thriving in this work and creating some amazing resources in the world. And so, yes, I do see people really thriving. I just one doula, maybe I think from one of my first doula trainings, first or second, she sustained her, family of 5, 3 children, and her partner during COVID when, he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do on her doula income as a fairly new doula. I have a friend and doula who transitioned out of bartending to do this full time. I'm seeing a lot of people really lean into this work and create some amazing things, from apps to books to podcasting, and a lot of them have come up in the last 5 years. So I would say most of the ways in which they're doing it, they're not just doing direct care doula work. And I think that that's where some of us get lost, is that they just go to births, go to families' homes for postpartum care. And that's fine, but the body doesn't love that forever. So most people are adding things like some form of education, some form of, podcasting and like sharing information, some form of like other supportive care, whether it's lactation, placental support. People are usually combining other areas of their brain that they didn't realize. Thinking of like Cheyenne, who does graphic design and then created the Educated Birth, like combining different spaces of themselves to still do this work. A dear friend did organizing and social justice and policy work. Now she works for California Family Working Coalition doing breastfeeding and paid family leave work. So I'm seeing people do this work in many different ways that creates a space for still true to their work as a doula and to families, and then also creating living wages, whether it's directly from doula work or a combination.
Yeah, I think creating almost like diversity in your own income streams, I guess, as a business owner is important, because you can focus on your one main thing, but then there's other things you can fall back on, such as if you're teaching childbirth classes online, or like you said, going in some of these other areas of creating revenue streams. But yeah, I think you're right. It seems to be that the doulas that are making it sustainable are being paid a living wage, but they're also seeking out these other ways of doing birth work that don't just involve being in the birth room.
Yes. And sometimes, like for my practice, my doula practice, when it was exclusively a doula, I made a living wage just as a doula. I made, enough for the way in which I looked at it, which I had just a big money. I geeked out on like finances and business finance. But the way I looked at it is like I made a living wage. That was the bare minimum of like what it actually cost to, book me as a doula and fill up. And then my teaching was, okay, I deserve a savings account. I deserve a retirement. And if I had been in any other field for, at that time, like 6 to 7 years, I would be making this amount of money. So it was also giving myself a raise and having intentionality around that portion of it, which most
people think designate your childbirth education income to go towards creating a savings account or retirement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically for Loom, because it was the first place I got like an actual 401k, because I've been doing birth work my entire adult life. I've been self-employed the entire time. So have other savings, but this was first 401k. And I was like, well, I literally just put the entire check there because I didn't need to live off of it. And now I have a nice little cushion there. So like sometimes it's that. Like sometimes like I deserve to be able to walk away from this career that I've done for a decade and decades. I'm still young. And actually be able to retire, because many birth workers don't. They're coming out of this work because they have to, because there's a physical or a health issue, but not with usually like savings.
Right. Talk to me about solo practice work, because I know you practice solo as a midwife, and I've heard some midwives and doulas talk about how that can be a recipe for burnout. So can you talk a little bit about safety nets or things you have set up to help you be more sustainable in that kind of practice model?
Yes. So my business structure is I am the midwife they get. However, my sense of safety net is I have a beautiful community of midwives ready to jump in. So I, as a solo provider, I was a doula for 8 years before I became a midwife. So I already know what my threshold, especially as a home birth midwife, is a
for
month.
on-call life and stuff.
Yes, I was already used to that, but I also know I can't take more than 4 births a month. Like, I don't want to. So I have that limit for myself. I take 6 weeks off every year. And I have been since my sister gave birth, because it was the first time I put it to the test and I wasn't missing that.
Like a 6-week chunk off then? Or
It varies depending on the year and what's going on. Most of the time, it's like 2 here and 4 weeks off. When I travel, I like to be gone for like 3 weeks and immerse myself in a new space. So I usually take that whole month to travel, but usually it's like short trips. I have a wedding this year, so my best friend is getting a maid of honor. So I'm using some of that time for her. But 2021, I took the full 6 weeks and went to Spain. Another midwife covered my practice, because people still pregnant are still needing prenatals and postpartum care, and that midwife saw everybody. So I normalize the fact that I'm human to my clients. There's a relationship. That's the beauty of the solo practice, is that you're getting me, but you're getting a whole human me. And so I normalize that I need to take time off. I have weekends where my phone, my messages are off, but I can get emergencies, which is their midwifery number. So call if there's something, but I'm not checking email or I'm not responding to you otherwise. And I normalize that with my clients, and everyone's pretty receptive. They're like, oh, yes, thank you. You should go take care of yourself. How was your vacation? I just came back from Mexico. And all of my clients are thrilled that their midwife rests so that I can actually show up for them better. So I think we as doulas want to be the end all be all to most people. That's just who we are. That draws us to this work. And we often have to remind ourselves and our clients that we're humans. We need rest. We need restoration. And I need to not talk to people and hold space for other people. I remind my clients and myself of that. I am only 31, so the bulk of my doula career was to my 20s. And when I used to travel, that was like my Instagram post of, I'm just 25 today. I'm not a 25-year-old person responsible for the safety and well-being of this mother baby. Today, I'm just a 25-year-old in Cuba. Like, that's all I'm being today.
You get to kind of switch off your midwife brain and rest, truly. I love how you're talking about, setting up expectations and clearly communicating so that your clients understand what they're getting. And that way they're not upset when you're not the one that answers the phone call or comes to the birth.
Yes. Okay.
But you also have used, again, it's that whole community building that you started in the beginning is what enables you to take that time off.
Yes.
And then I assume you are also doing the same for other midwives. Well,
yep. We trade time. I'm on call for a birth center this month because they're taking time off. So yes, you trade that, you build that community. Is that exchange still is happening? I do believe that this work should be done in a partnership in many ways. And I've seen some beautiful ones, and I've helped doulas build beautiful ones. I have never segued into it, mostly because I was still young and I was foolish to think this body would last forever. As I continue to move forward in this work, I will definitely revisit that. but it's also really hard to also find the right people to partner with. So I think that is really important. I've also seen partnerships not work. There's some pros and benefits to it all, but I think sustainability, people should build out a good partnership that works for them.
In your work mentoring and building this community at Centered, I imagine you've met some doulas and midwives who are on the edge of burnout or have already reached that wall where they just hit a wall and they can't do it anymore. What is your recipe? Like, what do you advise doulas to do who've reached that point or, are getting close to it?
If there is funds, I'm always like, take the time off. Remember why you decided to do this work and actually take time off. To the point where I've had people sending your backup. You still have people on call for folks. Send in the backup. You're not the doula they hired anyway. You're a shell of this person. So send in the backup and take the time off. From bare minimum, I'm always like, start with body. What does the body need? Is there supplements? Is there acupuncture, adaptogen, or just like light therapy? I do a thing when I've had some weird births at weird times. I have a wall of lights across from me, and I don't turn on any artificial lights when the sun goes down. So just resetting the circadian rhythm, it is so easy and free, and it's so restorative that I'll do that for 2 days straight. So I'll give them like a recipe of like tend to the body, tend to the mind, journal, vent, therapy, and then I would say tend to the creative side and the spirit of like why you got into this work. Yeah, so checking in and like, was it a sense of not being compensated well for the work? Do we need to give ourselves a raise? Was it a sense of not really setting the expectations to a client? Some doulas really are burnt out because they feel that they failed their clients. Is it the system? Is it navigating hospitals? Do you need to only do home births for a period of time? So really checking in on what is contributing to the burnout and tend to our body and mind for now, and then make changes for the future so that we aren't repeating this cycle of burnout. And then also really looking at like you're your own CEO of this business. What does HR department have in place to help you prevent this? So do you get weekends off? Are you answering emails all the time? Do you have systems set up where it takes me 30 seconds to answer email for an inquiry because it's a template? Like there's an automated process where I'm not bogged down by that portion of my business. So we'll look ahead and see like where are there places that we can create some change so that the thing that is causing the burnout is eliminated as much as we can control.
I think that is helpful. It almost sounds like you're suggesting that we put boundaries in place to protect ourselves.
Yes. Many birth workers would call me the boundary queen. I have a lot of them. I don't text clients. I like a lot of little things that can make this work very exhausting if you really allow it. And pregnant people and postpartum parents are already in a heightened state. With a trusted person like their doula, they can abuse that relationship unintentionally oftentimes, but if you have a full roster of clients, there's 10 to 12 people in the upcoming months that are needing you. If you allow all of them to send you texts whenever they want, they will, and it's overwhelming. So I usually set up a lot of boundaries on like how to communicate with me, what I want to know about. I give clients like this little reminder email that comes out every month of like, I want to create space for you. As questions come up, put them in your notes section, bring them to our appointment. Get in that habit of like, let me write this down for Jessica versus texting me because I'm not going to respond and I'm going to forget. Like building a habit for them so that they know for their pediatrician, because I'm the only one that's actually accessible to them. They don't do this to any other provider.
Right. They're not texting their pediatrician.
Yeah. So, but they still have questions. I'm like, this habit is helpful for all aspects of their parenting experience. And it's not a malicious request. It's actually one that actually will be helpful. So creating boundaries really helps them and sustains the doula.
I found that whenever you start to feel resentful, it's often because you are letting people cross boundaries or you haven't set boundaries. And so you feel like people keep wanting pieces of you and you can't give it. You can't give. It's a terrible feeling when you feel like people are constantly wanting you and you can never be sick or step away or have mental health issues. Yeah.
Yes. And then as a doula and midwife, the worst feeling is this person has crossed your bounds the entire pregnancy, and now you have to go to their infinite amount of hours of long birth.
Right.
And like, I don't want to dread going to work. That's why I work for myself. Like, I don't want to dread going to work. I don't want to be in a space where I am feeling annoyed while I'm at someone's birth. I'm guilty that I'm bringing this energy into this beautiful experience, all because I didn't set boundaries a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, it's helpful for my business. It's helpful for the part of this work I want to do. It's helpful for the mission. And it's helpful for longevity.
Deciding what your boundaries are and then protecting them and asking other doulas who are experienced and done it for a long time, what boundaries do they set up around text messages, phone calls, etc.? Because you're right. It seems like a lot of doulas just accept the fact that they will answer a text anytime from their clients. And it might be fun the first year that you're a doula, but then I can imagine it getting really old.
Yep. And my rule of thumb is like, it's fun if you do it for the first 2 people, but can you do it if it's 15? If you can't
or
imagine
20 or 25.
doing it, then you should probably have a plan in place now before that gets it, because the business will grow. Like, we're envisioning a full, beautiful, vibrant practice. Build it for then. I can't imagine being able to text that many people. My phone is always on Do Not Disturb. I would go insane every time it beeped. I was just like, I'm like, is this someone? Is this something? Like, it's not a way in which I can live and thrive in my own life. And so it has to be in place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this advice, Jessica. I feel like this is just an amazing primer for doulas and other birth workers to rethink and envision, like, what do they want their work life to look like? What is bothering them right now? What actions can they take to build community, to build sustainability?
I love creating the practice protocols for that specific doula. I'm very particular. I'm a human, and I own that. What I do for my practice and myself is not going to work for every doula. It's not going to work for the type of doula they want to be. So I'm always really, really intentional and really good at jumping into, well, how do you want to meet your clients' need? What do you envision and love about this work? And I have one doula who does weekly walks with her clients at 36 weeks. I can't imagine driving anywhere in Los Angeles for all the clients who are in that time frame. And she was loving it, but she was getting busier. And now I'm like, if you want to do that, why don't you just meet at a set location and walk with all of your clients? Now they all can come to you. It's still one time you're doing this, one location, versus you doing it with each individual. And it builds community for them. And she was like, I was like, yeah, just pick a park. They're free. Take a beautiful walking space. You show up every time. They can bring friends. They can bring potential clients. And then they create community, because that's hard to do when you're pregnant. And now she is reduced that sense of burnout and dread for something she really loved about her practice, but couldn't maintain with client load. I will say setting boundaries does not have to look like how I set boundaries, because some people get very turned off about the no texting when I tell doulas. Like, it doesn't have to look the same. The different pieces of this work that ignite us and that drain us are going to look different for each doula. What we want is you to identify what works for you so that you can show up, because we need you as the doula, not another me.
There's all kinds of technology today, too, that we have access to that we didn't used to, that we can use to set boundaries with texting and phone calls and things. So I'm sure there's many solutions to feeling that kind of overwhelm. Jessica, before you go, I want you to talk to our listeners a little bit about how you moderated the birth disparities of the anatomy of prejudice. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yes, it was in 2017, I think. And it was a panel that really ignited and kind of kicked off the conversation around the birth disparities, specifically in Los Angeles among Black birthing people. LA prides itself on being progressive. In some ways it is, and in many ways it just avoids the actual issue. And that is what we were seeing in birth work specifically, is that no one wanted to talk about what was actually happening. And we know the stats, Black people are dying in childbirth and Black infants are dying at alarming rates in the postpartum period. Myself and my co-founder of Centered, Julia Underwood, we and midwife, Debbie Allen, put together our heads to host a panel and a giant event where we talked about the real experiences of not only Black families, but the Black midwives and the Black OBs who care for these families, and how the disparities trickle to all people involved. So whether you're a birthing person or you're a person caring for them and you're a Black person, you're also feeling the responsibility, the weight, and then also many of the systemic issues within the system you work. It was a powerful event. It was like 150 people. It really sparked a lot of change within the LA birth space, doulas, midwives, and I think ongoing conversation.
And do you feel like that's a conversation that is still ongoing in the LA area, or?
Yes, there's been a lot more programs and resources that's come out of this conversation. There's been some beautiful birth centers that have come out, and I think more understanding when the spaces, particularly for Black families, is created, whereas that was some of the pushback we were getting in 2015, 16, 17, is that when there are spaces specifically created for Black or people of color, white counterparts were feeling excluded. And it's like, no, we actually need this safe space because, or if a person requested a Black doula, it's like, well, why? I can show up for them. So I think that questioning is starting. It's at least not public. It may still be happening in private spaces, but I think white doulas who are wanting to be more inclusive are also, creating space to make sure families know that there are resources available if you want someone who looks like you or understands your culture or speaks your language. They're not feeling defensive anymore and are pushing people towards other resources.
Jessica, you're doing such amazing work helping foster the next generation of doulas and midwives. Can you tell our listeners how they can follow your work and if there's any programs or anything you want to let them know about?
Yeah, if you are a doula, I would love to have you join Centered. It is our curated community for doulas. There are workshops and gatherings and an online space. It is not just for LA doulas. It is for all doulas. So that is a beautiful space. If you need mentorship, if you need community, if you have questions, this is the space we created just for you. We will be cheering you on and coaching you to your business success. If you're a pregnant person, I'm a midwife in Los Angeles. You can find me at jessicadiggs.com. And if you're just curious and want to hear me rant about things, I also write a Substack called Midwifery is More, where I dive deeper into the role of a midwife that's not just reduced to particularly home birth or an unmedicated birth, but I do a lot of conception support, a lot of whole person care. And so I'm there talking about random things.
Yeah, and make sure you follow Jessica on Instagram at Jessica A. Diggs and at Join Centered.
Yes.
Thank you, Jessica, so much for sharing your wisdom and your enthusiasm with us today about the field of doula work and midwifery.
Thank you for having me.
Today's podcast was brought to you by the Evidence-Based Birth Professional Membership. The free articles and podcasts we provide to the public are supported by our professional membership program at Evidence-Based Birth. Our members are professionals in the childbirth field who are committed to being change agents in their community.